It is an absolute pleasure for me this evening to be welcoming these two people here. We shouldn't have favourites, but we all do. So these two people here, and it's not just because they're at my beck and call. I've got to welcome our chairperson this evening, who is Michael Malone, who is obviously an author in his own right, and he's a fabulous chair. And we're going to welcome... And obviously the star of this evening, who is going to sparkle like the star he is Douglas Skelton. Thank you very much.
Good evening everyone, and thank you Karen for that fulsome introduction. Now, a fair few of you already know Douglas, but I've written down this introduction so you're going to get it anyway. He's the author of 11 books of non-fiction, with titles among them like The Devil's Gallop, Deadlier Than the Mail, Glasgow's Black Heart, and Frightener, The Glasgow Ice Cream Wars. He has since turned his back on all of that truth to make stuff up, and now we see the release of his second novel from Louth Press called Crowbait. So we are very fortunate we managed to get Douglas on his world tour of Scotland. So please give a warm welcome to Douglas Skelton. So, Douglas.
So, Michael.
You're pimping a new book. What's it all about then?
Right, Crowbait's the second in a 4-book series. The first one was Blood City. I'll just show you that because I like the props. And the central character, Davy McCall, is now 10 years older. I don't know if anybody's read Blood City, sorry. Blood Thistle.
Rewind, stop.
You've written that many books, you can't remember the titles.
So he's 10 years older from the events of Blood City, just getting out of jail. I won't tell you why his original 4-year sentence became 10 years, because that's part of the story. But he finds that the Glasgow underworld has completely changed thanks to the growth of the drug trade, and it's further complicated by the return of his father, Danny, who is the bogeyman in Davy McCall's life.
Now, Davy, he's a fascinating character. Talk to us about your mental process when you constructed them. Why did you laugh at that?
Because all my processes are mental. Davy, he's a bugger to write, he really is. I've made a rod for my own back with him because he doesn't talk much, and I like dialogue. But everything's internal with Davy. The thing about him, and the trick that I hope I pull off, is that there's a kind of Jekyll and Hyde in the way that you read him. The reader knows more about him than the characters of the book, so they have one image of him as this hard man who would break your bones as soon as look at you. But the reader should know that he's not really like that. He will break a few bones every now and again, but he's not really like that. He wants to break free, and there's a vulnerability to him, and I'm surprised I managed to get that out there. But there is a vulnerability to him that the other characters don't know about, and I hope that comes across. But it's hard to do. Well, it's hard for me because he doesn't say a lot, and he broods. He tends to brood. So he's a kind of traditional romantic character, I suppose, in that he's very broody. He's got the eyebrows for it as well. So I think that's Davy McCall.
Right. So he's broody and he didn't say very much.
No.
So based on yourself?
Of course. He's also catnip to the ladies, which is me.
Yeah. You keep telling yourself that. There is a sense that Davy, if he met the right people,
how you doing?
Could be. Good God, I created a monster. Can't do it. Right, there's a sense that Davy, if he met the right people, could be saved from himself. And I think that despite the nasty things he's involved in, that gets the reader on side. Was that part of your mental thought process?
Yeah, it was, because he wants to break free. And he has wanted to break free ever since he was 18. There's a scene in Blood City when he talks to the character Joe the Tailor, who's like his mentor and a father figure, and he asks them, can we change the way we are? and Joe doesn't really believe that they can, but he says that they can. And he's 18 at that time, but he's met Audrey, who's a straight arrow. She's a reporter in the Evening Times, and she could be a way for him to break free. I won't say too much because events take over and that doesn't actually happen. But yeah, he's always looking, he does always seem to be trying to find a way. And in book 2, when he comes out of prison, he's got a new father figure, and Sammy, an old lag who helps him through prison. And when he comes out, he really doesn't want to go back into the life, as they call it. But he's doomed to go back into the life because of what he is. There's no way that he's ever going to break free at this stage in the series anyway. And whether he does at the end remains to be seen. So yes, he is always trying to be a better person, but the thing inside him, and the thing that terrifies him most, is that he's very like his father. And with his father back on the scene, that's all coming to the surface.
The prison were pretty realistic. So go on, Spill, how much time have you spent inside?
Well, I really don't want to say, you know. It's a part of my life that I'm not very proud of, but I have done some bad things. There was research, obviously. I spoke to a couple of people. I read up on it. It's amazing what you can find on the old interweb to keep you right. And the idea is that it's perhaps not exactly the way it is, but within the reality of what I'm doing, that's the way it is. So it's really just research and talking to people.
Did you get a wee shot at the dog box?
I've never seen a dog box.
Really?
I've looked at photographs, and I've been in Berlin. I get out again. But I have been in Berlin, but I've never actually seen a dog box. But the photographs were enough.
So then there's the Father, Danny. And when I read about him, I read the scenes that he was in, I couldn't help wonder if he was inspired by any of the real life criminals that you've met when you were writing your non-fiction.
My lawyer says no. No, in fact, my lawyer says no! No, they're not. There's not one character in any of the books that's based on a real life person.
Well, that was a quick answer.
Yeah.
Moving on. Thanks for that. Your books are set in a very masculine world. Catnip again.
How you doing?
Where's your medallion?
No, I'm not showing you.
Anyway, moving swiftly on.
It's round my ankle.
Tell us about the important women in these men's lives.
Well, Audrey I've already mentioned, and she's very important to Davy in the first book, and naturally she comes back into the second book, although things have changed, which I don't want to go into because you need to read the book to find out. Who else is there? There's his mother as well, who was murdered, and that's an incredible an impression that was made on him, obviously because she was murdered more or less in front of him by his father, and he was then almost killed. New characters. There's Bernadette, Rab McClimate. Again, if you've read the first book, you'll know who I'm talking about. Rab McClimate is Davy's one of Davy's best friends, and who's now rising in the underworld. And by the time the second book opens, he's married. He's managed to dig himself up a woman, and he's settling down with children as well, or one child. So she's having a great effect on Rab. Bobby Newman, his other friend, has also met somebody, and she's a straight arrow, so that's going to change things. Who else is there? I can't think of anybody else. I've forgotten. There's Davy's dog, not a woman, but very important to him. Again, I'm not going to say, you'll need to read the book to find out. But the women come and go. There's another new character coming into book 2 called Vary. And she's figuring prominently in book 2 and then into elsewhere.
Now you hear musicians talking about second album syndrome. Did you suffer from second book syndrome? And what were the difficulties and pleasures of writing a follow-up?
Yeah, I was terrified because and I'm saying this, and I really do mean this seriously, much to my surprise, Blood City was extremely well received. I didn't expect it to be as well received as it was. So when I approached the second book, I was terrified I wouldn't be able to repeat that. And because of the surprises that were in the book, and again, I didn't actually see a lot of them as surprises, but then I knew what was coming, so they wouldn't be surprises to me. But because of the surprises, I thought people are going to expect that all the time, and you can't really repeat it quite often. It's like M. Night Shyamalan Ding Dong, who made what's the name of the film?
Sixth Sense.
The Sixth Sense. Thank you very much. Give that man a crisp. Made The Sixth Sense, so he'd set the bar so high that it was very difficult for him to get over it again. Well, I think he did, because I didn't much like The Sixth Sense, but most people think he didn't. And I'm not setting myself up the same as him, but it was the same idea. So I came along to book 2 and I thought, what am I going to do? How am I going to surprise people? And hopefully I will surprise them. There is one particular surprise, or 2 in fact, that I hope people will take a sharp intake of breath at.
As I mentioned earlier, you have a healthy backlist of non-fiction. So how does all of that experience help or hinder your work in fiction?
It helps, particularly these ones, because I spent years talking to underworld figures, if you want to call them, and walking the mean streets of the city doing investigations. So a lot of that, and all of that in fact, informed what I write. So I'm not saying that the books are totally realistic, but they're as realistic as I want to make them in the context of the story. Because I'm telling a story, I want to write thrillers. I want people to be excited, to be scared, to be frightened, to be surprised. And a lot of crime is basically dull. So if you were making it that realistic, it would be pretty dull. But yes, it did influence me a lot. Talking to police officers as well, you pick up some of the jargon, you pick up some of the way they think. The character of Jimmy Knight, the Black Knight, is actually, I'm going to go back in an earlier answer, is based slightly on one police officer that I met. Just the way that he spoke and the way that he viewed things influenced Jimmy Knight a great deal.
Glasgow forms a big part of your work. Why do you think the setting is so important, and can you imagine ever setting your books anywhere else?
Well, setting and a strong background, I think, is incredibly important. I believe that your background should be one of your characters. I think you need to try and convey, wherever you set the book, whether it's Glasgow, Edinburgh, or whatever, you need to try and convey that background somehow and give it a good strong base for the characters and the plot to spring from. I chose Glasgow because that's where I'm from and that's where I know about. Would I ever write about anywhere else? Yes, in fact I do, because book 2 goes down to Girvan and Ballantrae. The hotbeds of crime. Excuse me, why are you like ladies? My sisters. So it goes down to Girvan and Ballantrae, and again I chose that because I know there. But there are plans in the future to go further afield if I can get more books out.
Like Cumnock?
Oh, it's never right about Cumnock. Oh God, nobody would believe it.
I read one of your reviews of Blood City on Goodreads, which said it was the male equivalent of chicklet. How did you feel about that?
Oh, that's fine.
Did you read it?
I saw that, yes. Yeah, that's fine. Chicklet sells. I am that I have unexplored shallows. So yeah, didn't bother me whatsoever.
Cool. Now a wee bit highbrow question. Doris Lessing said there is no doubt that fiction makes a better job of the truth. So as someone who's written both non-fiction and fiction, do you agree, and why?
Mickey Spillane's, yeah, when you're writing non-fiction, it's factual. And there's a difference between fact and truth, believe it or not. And I think fiction can get the truth across far easier than non-fiction can, because you're tied down in non-fiction by being factually correct and making sure that you're not actually libeling anybody. Whereas in fiction, the sky's the limit, the boys aren't the slates. You can do anything, but as long as you have this truthful feeling to it. But I mean, truth can be anything. It can be Superman, as long as you base the reality and make it a believable world and a truthful world, then you can go anywhere with it. And it's the same with crime fiction, I believe. That you can actually do anything. Look at Sin City, completely off the wall, but they create this world that you believe in, so they can go anywhere with it. And it's the same. So that's the truth. It's not factually correct, but it's true. Does that make sense? Because it didn't make sense to me.
Did you say it all again?
No.
You had 11 non-fiction books, then you had a wee gap, and then you could combine with fiction. Is the world of a fiction writer different from someone who writes non-fiction?
Yeah, I get more attention writing fiction than I did with non-fiction.
Really?
Yeah, do things like this. I've never done anything like this with any of the non-fiction books. I mean, 11 books and I didn't get a launch. Oh.
Right, you need to buy 2 books each now.
Yeah. Hardly got a review. Sold a couple to my sisters. No, I think you stole them, didn't you?
You gave us one.
Yeah. Right, I stole that one. Yeah, fiction's far better. That's what I always wanted to do. I always had, even with the non-fiction, there was always this surface of storytelling on it, because I always approached whatever I was doing from the point of view of a storyteller. What stories do I want to tell? How am I going to tell it that will surprise the reader, but still keep it factually correct? That's one of the reasons that I stopped doing it, and I had my wee gap where I was resting. And because I felt guilty that I was taking people's lives and turning them into entertainment, with the exception of Frightener, which was a serious book, but really turning them into entertainment. And as the 11 books progressed, I pulled more and more away from the more modern crimes and started concentrating on historical stuff, which I was far more comfortable with. And now I'm even more comfortable with fiction. In fact, I'm so comfortable I'm practically comatose.
Well, we're glad that you woke up to come and talk to us tonight. Who has most influenced your writing?
Michael J. Malone.
Correct answer.
Frank Muir. Who else is here? Alex Gray. No, yes, is that? Sorry, that's the wrong way to say that. But prior to finding these wonderful writers, it has to be Ed McBain, because as I was a teenager, I was reading his books and I just devoured them. I loved the way that he wrote and tried to emulate. Even with the true crime, I was trying to emulate the way he wrote. So certainly starts with him. Moves on to more modern ones like Dennis Lehane, who I think is absolutely brilliant. And can't put a foot wrong as far as I'm concerned. Robert Crace is also very good. I tend to be influenced very much by the Americans. I like their style, I like their way of storytelling, and I try to emulate that, and emulate is just a posh word for steal. So certainly those.
So when you're stealing, who are you writing for?
Originally you have to write for yourself, because if you don't like what you're doing, how are you going to get anybody else to write it? But you also have to bear in mind that you do want other people to read what you're writing. So I do it by trying to be as entertaining as I can, and trying to get a lot of humour in as well, as much as I possibly can, in the very, very dark stories as they are. So it's myself originally, and then the reading public, who I hope will buy them in their thousands and put me into tax exile. That's my ambition. Tax exile, or save up to vote Tory, one of the two.
Why did you become a writer?
Why? Well, Michael, I'm glad you asked that. seemed like the thing to do. I was always going to be an actor, darling. That was always my ambition, to be an actor. I then got a small role on, does anybody remember Sutherland's Law? In telly? I was in one episode of that, as a drunken thief, typecasting. They said, where are you from? East Kilbride, right, drunken thief. So when I saw myself, I realised I was no actor, and that was it. Although I did get to meet Brian Cox, which was good, and he set himself up that night. It was an overnight shoot up near Oban, and it was summer, but it was cold. He set himself up as the morale officer and kept everybody going. And he was very, very good. I even signed my equity application, but I was knocked back. Bastards. So that was the original idea. And I'd been writing on and off just bits and pieces, plays mostly for school, comedy, sketches, and I decided then, right, if I'm not going to act, I'll write. And from then on I just started writing short stories in the school magazine, things like that.
Can you remember the first thing that you wrote?
The earliest thing I remember writing was, I can remember lying on the floor in the flat we lived in Springburn, because I'm from Glasgow. I just happened to live in East Kilbride for a while, but I got out, thank God. I had a map and a Sherpa guide. I was lying on the floor in the flat, and
Sherpa guide was?
You know what I was? He might have been. In the flat in Springburn, and writing a story called Who Killed Cock Robin? And it was a murder. Cock Robin in the story was some TV personality and was murdered in the studio, and a detective came to investigate it. I can't remember who it was that did the murder, but I just remember writing this story.
So did you not write a TV thing as well? An award-winning TV thing?
I did. That was sometime later.
Give us some details. Don't be shy.
Yeah, Clyde Cablevision. Cable was just beginning to take off in Glasgow, just start, and they had this public access channel in which wee oiks like me could come along and make our own videos, and Eddie did one as well, who's a friend of mine up there. So I decided that I was going to do this, and that's a great idea. I'm going to do a bit of dawdle, dead easy. So I wrote this half-hour drama called Extremes. And it was a crime story, believe it or not, funnily enough. And it was set in a prison interrogation, a police office interrogation room. And that's basically what it was, because we didn't have the money to move about, so we had to keep it like 2 sets, and that was it. We filmed it in Maryhill Community Central Halls, because they gave us the rooms for nothing. Over, I think, 3 or 4 weekends. I had professional actors who I didn't pay. They were doing it for the experience. One of them was a guy called, at that time, Callum McIninch. He's now Cal McIninch, and he pops up. He's on TV constantly. Haven't seen him. I'm saying constantly. Haven't seen him for a while, but he does pop up. He was at the Citizens Theatre 2 or 3 years ago. So we made the thing. It went out on Clyde Cablevision, and somebody complained and said that I was bigoted against Catholics. So the reasoning was that the 2 characters' names, the police officer and the young Ned, I can't remember the characters' names, but apparently they were names of old Celtic players. Now, I don't like football, so I wouldn't have known that. And because they're both basically thugs, this guy decided that I was anti-Catholic. But because he'd complained, Clyde Cablevision then had to actually take a close look at the programme, which they hadn't looked at before. And it was about racism, basically. And they thought, do you know, we could enter this for a Royal Television Society Award as a dramatised programme because of the educational content. This is the Scottish Royal Television Society, not the big one down in London. So they phoned me up and said, would you mind if we did? And I said, oh, go ahead, I didn't think it would get anywhere, but it won. So 2 or 3 of us went along to the dinner on the Carrick, if you remember the Carrick, the ship. They had got the award. So that was my award-winning night.
So why did your TV career stop there?
Well, it didn't, because I made another one,
Oh, right.
which I directed as well, but it got nowhere. But it wasn't educational. Again, it was just a straight drama. Nothing educational about it. Why did it stall? Because it's so hard to break into. And guess my face didn't. I've got a great face for radio. I could do that.
Crime is throughout your oeuvre, if I can say that. You could word that, oeuvre. Can you see yourself writing in any other genre?
Probably not, but I would like to write a western, because I love westerns, so I would like to do that, but the chances are that no, I'll stick to just killing people in the streets. But I always said that Blood City was basically a western, and westerns do influence a lot of what I do. The climax of Blood City is this showdown basically in this deserted street, Duke Street, in the middle of the night. That's why I could get it deserted, because it was the middle of the night. And that's a western basic. And a lot of the things that I do it's westerns, really. And the way that the people react to things, it really is just, it's influenced very much by westerns. And even Davy, I suppose, is talking about him in a direct line from Shane. To me, you could follow, from Shane through the Clint Eastwood characters to the way that Davy reacts. It's all based on that.
So
emulate, you see, emulate.
It's still big words, isn't it? So, are you where you want to be as a writer?
No. Am I in tax exile? Am I visiting here from my villa in the Caribbean? No. You've got to keep trying. Yeah, I've got these two out. There's another two coming in this series. So from that point of view, yes, it's great, and I'm really delighted that I finally managed to break into fiction, because it was so hard to get into it. But I want to go on, I want to do more. And there's a lot more going on in my head. I've got things going on in my head that would make Sherlock Holmes drop his pipe, I'm telling you.
And on that note, drop your pipes, everyone, because it's your turn to ask questions. Who would like to go first? First question, please.